Amazon, one of the largest companies in the world, has a huge portfolio of different tech-related and software-adjacent products. In this episode, we'll talk about their huge portfolio of products, the different revenues that they bring in, and more importantly, where they actually make all of their profit. Welcome to Kopec Explains Software, the podcast where we make computing intelligible.
This week we're talking all about Amazon. Let's start with, what do they actually sell?
Of course, many of us know Amazon as an online retailer. In fact, they're the largest online retailer in the world, and they even rival the sales of traditional brick and mortar retailers like Walmart. But they're so much more than just an online retailer, so much more than just a company that sells other companies' products. They make many of their own products. Some of those are general consumer goods that they manufacture under the Amazon Basics line with contract manufacturers and factories in East Asia. But they also produce many of their own high-tech devices. Things like the Amazon Kindle e-readers, the Echo line of voice-controlled devices, the Amazon Fire tablets powered by their own operating system, Fire OS, that is built as a fork of Android. They also provide many services, everything from music to video streaming to ebook subscription services. But the segment of their business that the average consumer may not be as aware of is AWS, Amazon Web Services. Amazon Web Services is a very, very important component of Amazon's business. So important that the previous internal CEO of Amazon Web Services, Andy Jassy, just became the CEO of Amazon proper to replace Jeff Bezos, really giving everybody an idea of just how important AWS is to the company.
So what is AWS?
Amazon Web Services, which started in the mid-2000s, is infrastructure as a service. It's a way of providing compute resources to other companies that need to set up their own online servers, own online services, instead of having to have their own data center, having to have their own physical servers. They can just rent those resources from Amazon. And just about everyone rents these resources from Amazon. Everybody from large streaming services, even companies as big as Comcast, to small startups. Instead of having to go and build their own infrastructure, rents infrastructure from Amazon. And what kind of digital infrastructure am I talking about? Things like storage. Where are you going to put all of your data? Things like compute. Where are you going to get your servers from? Are you actually going to go purchase a server from HP or Dell and put it on a rack and put it into your own data warehouse with its own controlled electricity and cooling? No, you're just going to rent that service from Amazon. And we talked about cloud services, which are what these are known as, in a previous episode called What is the Cloud, which I'll link to in the show notes. There are other companies in this space. There's Google. There's also Microsoft with Azure in this space. Google Cloud, Microsoft Azure are the two big competitors to AWS. There's many smaller ones as well. But AWS is the largest, and they were also one of the first. They were really the company that pioneered infrastructure as a service. And it's become a huge part of their business.
There are other aspects of their business as well, though.
Right. They also have a large international operation. They have many individual Amazon sites for different nations. They also own some subsidiary companies that are large e-commerce ventures on their own within their respective markets. And then they have physical stores. They bought Whole Foods a few years ago, so they own all of the Whole Foods physical stores. They have some of their own Amazon stores. That's really more in the experimental phase, but they have some brick and mortar stores where they experiment with things like automatic checkout, where you don't even need to go to a person or to a machine and scan all your items, but you can literally go into the store and walk out with them. So they're getting involved more and more over the last decade in brick and mortar. And then they also are actually a big intermediary for e-commerce sellers. They offer seller services. So let's say you have some products you want to sell through Amazon, and you're not like a big brand that has its own warehouses. You can actually rent warehouse space from Amazon, and then to promote your products, you can buy ads on Amazon. So I have some friends who work in this space, and one thing that they say is that they actually end up giving Amazon almost 50% of the sales that they earn because they're paying Amazon for warehouse space. They're paying Amazon for advertising their products with ads on Amazon. And then Amazon just takes a cut of every product that's sold anyway on top of the warehouse space and the buying of ads on Amazon. So Amazon actually takes a huge cut of all of these third-party sellers that sell on their site. So Amazon has a huge number of different businesses.
How does Amazon organize all these different businesses? So what are their different divisions?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've been reading through their most recent quarterly report as well as their most recent annual report. And what they tend to do is they actually group so many of these together. They talk about everything that's AWS as one segment, and then everything else that's from North America. So that includes Kindle sales. That includes, of course, the retail side. That includes seller services. All of that gets grouped together just as North America. So anything that's a sale in North America that's not AWS just gets all grouped together as one big lump sum. And then they have everything that's international that's not AWS grouped together as one big lump sum. So what you end up with is really three separate divisions that they divide their sales and their income into, which are North America, International, and AWS.
Before we take a deeper dive into Amazon's numbers, what's the difference between income and sales?
Right. In their reports, they divide up into sales and income, which you can think about as revenue and profit. Sales is literally how much money people give to Amazon, how many dollars flows to Amazon. Whereas income is taking all of those dollars, all of that revenue, and then subtracting expenses. So income you can think about as profit.
Well, let's talk about these numbers. How is Amazon doing?
At a very high level, Amazon has an incredible amount of sales through its North American and international operations, but a very small amount of profit through those operations. Most of the profit, the vast majority, comes from AWS. But AWS has a small amount of relative sales to the North American and international operations of everything else. So it's very interesting because you're bringing in most of your money through retail, through their services, but you're not actually making most of your profit doing that. So where do you focus your business? And this has been something that we'll talk about in a little bit that's been going back for a long time with them, having huge amounts of money coming in, but not huge amounts of profits from that money that's coming in. So let's talk specific numbers.
So for this conversation, we've looked at the Q3 most recent report for Amazon. What was it saying?
Right, so looking at the trailing 12 months, those are the 12 months up to Q3 when they created the report, they had a total of $458 billion in sales. That's a huge number, almost $500 billion in total sales. Breaking that up by their three segments, in AWS, they had $57 billion in sales. In the North American segment, which is everything in North America excluding AWS, they had $273 billion in sales. And looking at the international segment, again, excluding AWS, they had $128 billion in sales. So of the three segments, the biggest is North America, the second is international, and the third is AWS.
Let's look at Q3 by division. What was happening there?
Yeah, let's really get into some more fine-grained numbers. So here we're just looking at Q3 of 2021 from their most recent report. In North America, they had $65 billion of sales. That's up 10% year over year. However, on that $65 billion of sales, they only made $880 million of operating income. And that's actually down 61% from the year ago quarter. Similarly, in international, while they had a nice amount of sales at $29 billion, they actually lost money. Now, those sales were up 16%, but they managed to lose $911 million in operating income. So this is where we get to the interesting part, looking at AWS. AWS had the largest growth in sales at $16 billion in sales for the third quarter, and they had $4.9 billion in income. Now think about that for a moment. AWS had by far the lowest sales number, $16 billion versus $29 billion for international and $65 billion for North America. But the largest amount of income, $4.9 billion versus a loss of $911 million internationally and income of $880 million for North America. So the margins on AWS are incredible, while the margins on everything else seem to be quite poor.
That actually fits with Amazon's history of their profits and margins.
Right, before they even had AWS, and again, AWS came about to be a business in the mid-2000s, Amazon was notorious for having very, very poor margins and actually not making a profit for a significant portion of its history. When Amazon was first founded in the mid-1990s until 2001, they actually didn't turn a profit. They were growing rapidly, but they were growing all based on investment money, and the sales that were coming in were not covering their costs. They continued to have very slim margins until AWS really started to take off. There was a lot of concern amongst some analysts that Amazon was never going to be a very profitable company. It wasn't until they had AWS as a business segment that they really managed to start turning major profits. And then the profits from AWS are funding a lot of the innovation and research that goes on in the rest of the company. So it's no surprise then that their current CEO was the former CEO of AWS.
Overall, Amazon has lots and lots of sales, but in terms of where they're making their money, it's all from Amazon Web Services.
That's right. It's very interesting to see how different the margins are on the retail side versus in AWS. All right, thanks for listening to us this week. Rebecca, how can people get in touch with us on Twitter?
We're at Kopec Explains, KOPECEXPLAINS.
Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.